Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join our webinar today, highlighting or where we're discussing operationalizing MITRE attack and threat intelligence to help you prioritize threats based on their exploitability and accelerate your response to reduce your overall exposure and your overall security debt. Before we go ahead and get started, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and the process recording will be sent to all registrants and attendees after the webinar concludes. This will also be available on the Nagomi website under Resources, Resource Center, and Webinars. As just a reminder, this is intended to be an interactive webinar, so feel free to submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. All questions will be answered during the Q&A session. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Most teams collect threat intelligence and map TTPs to the MITRE attack framework, but basically struggle to act on either in their entirety. This often happens due to several fragmented tools, siloed tools, several manual processes, and lack of any actionable context that would connect the dots between one tool and the other to help you understand the whole picture and take the proper remedial action. As a result, it causes delayed remediation, ineffective way of assessing risk, and potentially missed opportunities to strengthen your overall defenses against today's evolving threat landscape. Today's webinar explores how Nagomi helps organizations operationalize the threat intelligence and the MITRE attack framework to reduce threat exposure and prioritize what matters most to the organization and help reduce the overall security debt. We are excited to be your speakers today. I'm Kaustubh Jagtap. I'm the manager of technical marketing at Nagomi, and I'm joined by Brad McHow, our outstanding sales engineer. Brad formerly worked with Palo Alto Networks and Zscaler. He works with security teams to validate security controls and drive risk down through smarter exposure management. So everybody has seen a variation of these slides, and everybody knows that teams are overwhelmed with data, but these numbers will actually help you kind of quantify some of that information. Just in 2024, we had about 40,000 new CVEs that were discovered, 33% of which were critical or high severity. So now you can only imagine when this kind of translates across all the security tools you own without understanding which is critical, what is critical, and how it actually applies to your organization, you are left trying to figure out, how do I proceed with this? On an average, any application-related CVE took about 74 days to remediate, and a network CVE took about 55 days to remediate. This is from their being detected, reported, and you actually taking action against it. There has been a huge challenge where more than 50% of the users are facing significant challenges taking TI and actually operationalizing it in their SecOps environment. And even though 89% of organizations use MITRE in their SecOps environment, 78% of these things, MITRE tactics and techniques, still need to be manually mapped. You need to understand that MITRE attack and threat intelligence aren't new, but the sheer volume of threat data that we are getting today is just simply massive and staggering. These frameworks and threat intelligence were designed to help us prioritize what matters, but without the right tools and skill sets in a security operations team, they often just end up adding noise instead of cutting through it. Instead of driving action, MITRE attack and threat intelligence just become more than dashboards. They just have you create more reports and in general just add more confusion to an already cluttered response landscape, if you want to say that. So let's just take a look at why operationalizing these valuable resources like the MITRE attack framework and threat intelligence is still a struggle for security teams today. Everybody and all the tools we do talk about operationalizing and helping you operationalizing MITRE and threat intelligence, all of which sounds great in theory, but in practice, security teams do tend to face real challenges, some of which are there's basically data overload that we just kind of saw statistics about. There are too many alerts and TTPs, and there is not enough context for them to act on it. Manual mapping is what we saw another statistic about. That is still a huge bottleneck. correlating those TTPs that you've identified with all the new threats that are being discovered to controls does take time and it drains resources, and you already have time and resource constrained teams. Tools, while they might connect and talk to each other, these teams operating these tools are still operating in silos. And inconsistent data formats can always and almost hinder integration and essentially cause you to look at way more alerts than you need to. Essentially, in fact, increasing your security without you understanding what is it that I need to prioritize and what is it that I need to fix. Additionally, these mappings, which are done manually, they often lack operational and your environmental context, which doesn't accurately reflect your organizational risk profile. And at the end of the day, a lot of teams still remain reactive using the attack after incidents have happened because they don't know how to proactively use the MITRE framework in their environment. And lastly, we could just kind of highlighting, because the teams are so overwhelmed and they might be understaffed, there is a huge skills gap that can effectively slow down your progress. And all this being said and done, we take a look at all this stuff, we don't get real clear metrics to actually be able to measure impact that the MITRE framework and threat intelligence is adding to your security posture, or how it is making a change to your security posture. This is where Nagomi makes the difference. This is how Nagomi helps you. First, we connect to your existing tools through secure read-only APIs, pulling in data about your assets, control coverage, and tool effectiveness. This gives you a complete contextualized view of your environment without even lifting a finger, because these are read-only APIs. You have several APIs that you can pull information in, giving you an understanding of your overall attack surface. Then we go beyond identifying gaps. We prioritize the most critical TTPs and exploitable vulnerabilities based on your specific and unique business context. And then when we add threat intelligence and frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK, NIST, and CIS, we help you correlate what we've already pulled in with the threat landscape so that your team knows what exactly is that they need to fix first and effectively reduce your overall security debt. And lastly, it's not just critical to take all this information, connect the dots. It's also important to track the performance of your overall tools and communicate how effective or what is the impact of all the actions that you've taken. We help you communicate that impact. Our dashboards take all this technical data that you see across multiple disparate tools, and we turn that into executive ready insights that can show you how your security investments are reducing risk and aligning with your business goals. That way, your security leaders as well as your practitioners can have full confidence in what actions are being taken are actually causing that impact. I wanted to quickly turn it over to Brad. That way he can highlight how this all looks in action. Over to you, Brad.
Thank you, KJ. All right, I'm going to share my screen here and just run through a high-level demo of our threat exposure management module. Okay, here. Okay. Assuming everyone can see my screen here. Excellent. All right, so I'll just kind of frame it, right? It all starts with us connecting to your security tools via read-only APIs. Currently, you can see we're connected to CrowdStrike Falcon, Adversary Threat Intelligence, Azure AD, Intune, etc. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull in information about the policies, configurations, and details about the assets that these tools protect. So this is really that first pillar that we have where we're looking at understanding your security posture. Now we're going to focus on the second pillar today, which is reduced threat exposure. But that first pillar is really important because that's how we're going to map all the MITRE tactics and techniques to your environment in a continuous manner. So once we understand your security posture, we then profile your company based on the industry, the geo, and any adversaries or campaigns you care about. So for instance, if a company in your industry was hit by, scattered spider or Labribith Kalima, well then we can quickly come in here. You might want to know, hey, am I protected? Am I vulnerable to any of the different vulnerabilities that they're using? Do I have any, what can I do to improve my defenses versus adversary? You simply come in here, You click on the adversary. Now, typically, once you know the MITRE tactics and techniques, this will be that manual process you have to go through that could take days or weeks and a certain level of expertise to find out. We're doing it continuously in an automated way. You can quickly see all the tactics and techniques across the MITRE attack chain. Now, we have open source that we pull in automatically here. That's kind of comes out of the box. But if you do have your own threat intel, like CrowdStrike Adversary, that you want to enrich the data, you can do that as well for additional context. So you'll see we across the attack chain here, left to right, all the different techniques. And this is we're telling you exactly where you're strong, and we're highlighting where you can improve. So if you want to go all the way to the left of the attack chain here and say, hey, how are we doing in valid accounts? You can click here and we can see the three capabilities you have that can protect against this technique. Now, every one of these capabilities are policies. We're giving you a rating based on how well it's configured. And if you jump into that, you can even drill down at what are we checking. So for MFA, we're checking 11 different tests to rate how you're protected against this technique with this capability. Many times we'll see that, MFA is coverage for all users deployed, but we'll find out that MFA registration is only at 50 or 60% because there's no, conditional access or you're not forcing users to actually register. So we drill in there. Also, even if you have something where you have, 0.1% drift from your normal policy, we'll be able to come in here and identify those failed assets, and it could be as 45 failed assets out of 40,000. So we're continuously mapping these techniques to your environment and monitoring your policies to show where you can improve. From there, we also show you the top susceptible techniques from this adversary group that based on your attack surface and the utilization of your security tools. And then we're also looking at known exploitable vulnerabilities that are known to be used by this campaign or this adversary. And also we're mapping that to your environment. So we can quickly see here, there's 4 assets in this environment that have this critical CVE that's being used by this adversary, and 3 of them are missing EDR. So we know they're missing that compensating control. So that even elevates how much we'd want to dive into this further. As we come down here, we actually give you a defense plan that's prioritized by what will have the greatest positive impact to protect you from this adversary. And we give you exactly the different steps you can do. This is actionable steps you can do. This is where we take that intelligence you're getting, the test techniques, map to your environment, but also give you action that you can take to operationalize that intelligence. So each one of these you can click on and you can see exactly what the test is, what remediation steps you can do to go ahead and implement this change. And if this was something you wanted to have an accepted risk for, to say, hey, there's a reason we don't want to do this, whether that be a business limitation, technical limitation, or performance, you can do that and we'll give you credit for it and track that accepted risk over time. So you can quickly gather, hey, we have 82% protection against this adversary, and we can get up to 96.7 if we implement these 15 action items. Now we don't stop there. A lot of times you may be like, okay, we don't always look at all the campaigns and adversaries only. We might want to look at different scenarios, threat scenarios, right? So we go ahead and also pull in threat scenarios, such as phishing. Out of all the different phishing tactics and techniques out there, apply them to your environment and tell you how are you doing? How can you improve? Or ransomware. So if we dive into ransomware here, we go ahead and give you a score based on the capabilities and controls you have in place to stop the tactics and techniques associated with ransomware. We also gather to the top capabilities that we find that you can make improvements on from a basic configuration standpoint or hygiene, also from an advanced configuration standpoint. Once again, each one of these we're actually giving you ratings based on the configurations of the policies that you can dive into. And you'll see here, there's actually 1% of the 82% are actually, 1% is accepted risk here from a business limitation. Also, we're tracking how are you doing against ransomware over time. So this is based on 60 days right now, but this could be from 14 days up to a year. And you can see what different capabilities you've made improvements on over the last 60 days and any degradation. So if there was a policy that accidentally got sent to the wrong group or distributed, you would be able to know right here if there was a mistake or something you want to look into by the degradation. Also, we showed you the defense plan previously, based on a specific campaign or adversary, but also we can give you the defense plan based on ransomware here or phishing or whichever threat scenario you're looking at. And we're saying, hey, these are the top 15 defensive remediations you can do that would improve your score from 81.9% to 96%. And once again, you can go through these one by one and look at what they are, how to remediate it. And not only that, through each one of these screens, you can actually create a ticket from the interface that pulls over the remediation steps. This could be your Jira, ServiceNow, and you can have that assigned to the correct admin or engineer and have that go through your workflow in your organization. Now from here, we know a lot of adversaries, not just they're using MITRE, but they're also using different exploits and vulnerabilities, right? So we want to help you funnel down the vulnerabilities. So for instance, here we're pulling in 2.7 thousand that are known exploitable vulnerabilities. We cross-reference the vulnerabilities with CISA. Now, this is also coming, these are coming from your vulnerability scanners, right? Your Tenable, Rapid7. So we're pulling them all in, and then we're giving you a funnel. So, hey, we can drop it down by high and critical CVEs, which ones don't have compensating controls, like they're missing EDR, or we're also cross-referencing them with known exploitable campaigns that you're interested in. So I'm going to take this 2.7 thousand and I'm going to go all the way down to the last filter. And I can already see I've moved it down to 30. And maybe I want to even narrow it down more and I'll bring it down. Hey, let's just look at critical ones. Now I've narrowed it down from 2.7 thousand to 3 critical CVEs I can look into that are on assets that are missing EDR and being exploited by a campaign in the wild. Now, there's a lot here to consider, right? We're looking at all the different adversaries and campaigns. We're looking at threat scenarios, other things like programs as well. But what if you're like, hey, what should I do overall, right? We want to make it very easy for you to improve your security posture. So we go ahead and have a defensive plan we give you that says, hey, out of all your policies, configurations, and all your assets, applied with all the tactics and techniques and threats we see in the wild, we go ahead and say, hey, these are the top 15 things you can do today with your current security tools to improve your effectiveness from 84.5% to 97%, which is just rating how well you're protected against all those tactics and techniques. And here, we give you 15 actionable steps you can take, and these will keep refreshing as you go through these to continuously improve. Now, as you take a remediation step here, you can go ahead and click it and actually track the remediation from the platform. So next time we scan your environment and your tools and pull in that data, we're able to say, hey, what percent of this was remediated? So you can track those remediations over time and track your improvements. Now, an important part of this also is being able to report on this information. Now, we do have a separate presentation that will go over the reporting module, but at least from the adversary and campaign standpoint, any one of those adversary and campaigns we have, we can pull in and you can quickly give yourself a report on how you stack up against the campaign. So we'll look at what tools you have and your overall threat score. But then we're going to dive in. We're going to pull over those top susceptible techniques from this campaign, or adversary, I should say in this case, right? We're pulling over that attack chain so you can see we're highlighting where you can improve. And also, we're giving you recent improvements over the last 7 days of this campaign. So if you want to report up to leadership, why not? You were able to make improvements and actually show, hey, since you told us to look into this, we've improved this X% over the last, 7 days. So be able to report on that and your defensive plan here on what you could do if you implemented these different changes that we recommend. So an easy way to track, report on different adversaries and campaigns to leadership and whatnot. From there, that kind of wraps up my portion. Just to recap, right? We reviewed how you can search and look for any campaign or adversary and map the tactics and techniques to your environment and get a defense plan. We looked at how you can look at different threat scenarios like ransomware and phishing, map those tactics and techniques to your environment, get a defense plan and to improve on those and track your improvement over time. We looked at how you can funnel vulnerabilities. And then we gave you an overall defense plan to increase your security posture in a prioritized way, measurable way, and in a way where you can report on it and actually prove how you're increasing your effectiveness to adversaries we're seeing in the wild. From there, I'm going to pass it back to you, KJ. I don't know if there's any questions or whatnot, but back to you.
Perfect. Do you mind stop sharing for a second? Yeah. All right.
Yep.
All right. So just as I mentioned before, please note that we do have a Q&A functionality in Zoom webinar that you can submit your questions through. But before we go ahead and get started into the Q&A session, I do want to highlight we do, as Brad mentioned, we have a separate a presentation focused on metrics and just tool utilization. These are the dates for the upcoming webinar series, or from curious to convinced in 30 minutes. Essentially, these are snack-sized webinars intended for you to quickly get an overview of our product and then follow up with any questions or anything of that sort. So the next webinar will be on June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern that focuses on reporting and automating board reporting and security reports and tracking program performance. And the one on July 9th will focus on existing tool security effectiveness. All of these combined together do help you reduce your security debt. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go into our Q&A section. We do have a couple of questions that we have received here that I can start off with. So Brad, the first question is, in what ways does Nagomi help kind of close the loop between threat intelligence, MITRE ATT&CK, and other security frameworks and remediation?
Yep. We close the loop is closed because we're continuously pulling in the MITRE ATT&CK framework tactics and techniques. And usually you can get that information. Your threat intel feeds will give you that information. You can get it. But a lot of times, once you have that information, it's very hard to assess your environment, your tools, the policies, configurations, and know where you should fix. And that's kind of where it really becomes a challenge. And that's where we come in, right? Because we have that first pillar where we get your security posture. We understand all those different intricacies between the different tools. So we're able to go ahead and continuously map those tactics and techniques to your environment, monitor that improvement, and have that continuous feedback loop to see what your risk, your exposure is, and continuously improve on it.
Perfect. The next question that we have here is, can these campaigns that you just sorry, that you shared in the demonstration, is there a way to kind of run them automatically, or do you have to just kind of manually select them and run them on a weekly basis? Because I know you mentioned something about tracking performance over time. Do they have to kind of run it continuously or multiple times in that period to understand your improvements, or how can we track it, or how can someone track it?
Yep. So then we select on the campaign, which tells us our mapping. Now we do scanning of your environment, right? So when you do a change, that's going to update in the platform, but we see that change when we scan. Right now, typically a lot of customers are doing 2 scans a week. But we are seeing some folks actually go down and say, hey, we want to do it every day. It just depends how often you put changes in, how often you update things in your environment. But once we scan, we're able to go ahead and see what changes you had to improve your score. So we can change the scanning, but usually anywhere from 1 day to twice a week to once a week.
Perfect. And then another question that we have here is, how can security teams move from passively mapping threats to the MITRE framework and actively reducing their threat exposure and security debt using platforms like Langobi?
Yeah, really operationalizing is the key there, right? You get this data, you get the different threats, the tactics, techniques, but without understanding your security posture, all the policy configurations on all the different assets, your whole attack surface, it's really hard to operationalize that intelligence and track it over time. So that's really where we come in, that first pillar, which I believe there's going to be a presentation on July 9th on that. So I definitely would say tune into that. Once we understand that, we're able to really operationalize that and continuously track and improve your performance. Because once you know what policies and kind of capabilities you have, once you have them, but what should you prioritize? We want you to prioritize whatever exposes you to the most risk, right? That's where the reduced threat exposure comes into. So once we're able to map the MITRE to it, then we know, hey, this is why you should fix this capability or implement this change in this policy because it's going to close this loop where you have a risk or this gap. So I think, being able to do this in a manual, automated way continuously is definitely that's the way we got to do it with the way the environment is, the way things are changing, the way the attackers are pivoting. Um, a lot of times these are point in time assessments, but that's only a point in time, right? We want to continuously do that, continuously monitor, track, and improve.
Absolutely. And then Brad, you briefly touched on security that like what exactly in your opinion kind of does that comprise of? I mean, it doesn't have to focus on just the threat landscape aspect of things here, but in general for my edification, what exactly, would you consider a security debt and how do we kind of help reduce it? You can talk about I believe all three modules here and we can focus on them specifically later as well, but I just want to get understand your view because this concept is new for me personally. So I just wanted to get your view.
Yep, security debt, in my opinion, the way I see it is as you continuously change, as our environments change, we add new tools, we migrate from maybe some legacy tools to next gen tools. There's security policies that just get moved over. You should really restart over with a new next gen tool, for instance, to kind of to optimize the policy, but it's not always possible. You may have all these different policies that you just migrate over just to be more expedient, or just because it's super complicated to start from the beginning. But this adds a lot of complexity, a lot of debt, and not doesn't let you take advantage fully of the new tools you have. So we want to be able to go in there and say, hey, you maybe you can't update and change your security debt overnight and optimize everything, but at least we can look at your policy configurations to say, hey, this is where you should start to improve that and reduce that security debt based on the risk it's exposing you to.
Okay, so in that case, what you're trying to basically say is you have a backlog of maybe defunct, redundant policies or unupdated policies that are potentially causing that are potentially causing your posture to be reduced or not be so efficient. And then when you start adding that threat level context with threat intelligence and MITRE ATT&CK, now you have even more challenges because now you may not be even really focused on threats that could potentially matter to you. So that in it's more of like a snowball or cascading effect that first your policies were not configured correctly, and now you have these threats that are now popping up specific to your team or your organization. All of that can combine into like a massive disaster. So and that can essentially compound your security debt. So what we are helping you understand is where your gaps are in your configurations, policies, and then when you add that threat level context, you can now focus specifically around, hey, don't go looking for all the CVSS 10 or 9 scores if they are especially behind an air gap system. They could be a CVSS 3 vulnerability that could be on an internet facing device that's completely unprotected. Maybe you want to consider focusing on that. But I believe the good point that you made here is that getting that environmental context of what is in your environment right now, not just the policies, but the actual asset, where it's located, what that information is, plus what threats would matter to your organization. That combining together could help you pinpoint what is it that you need to focus and prioritize right now, rather than looking at a million CVs or a million things to remediate. Is that accurate to say?
Absolutely, that's
Okay.
accurate. And like you said, it's not just the policy configurations, but understanding the assets themselves. What are all the assets that I have out there, and what do they have deployed on them that I'm not aware of? And the security that just complicates things very much so. And then, like you said, the changing, evolving threat landscape out there doesn't make things any easier. So.
Perfect. That is about all the questions that we've received. If anybody has any other questions, then feel free to submit them via Q&A. If not, I think we are at time. So thank you again, Brad, for taking the time to share your thoughts and show an awesome demo. And thank you for everybody who attended. As a reminder, again, this webinar was being recorded and will be shared with all participants, registrants, and attendees alike, and will be available on our website. So that being said, thank you again and have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.